Ladies and gentlemen, our program will now begin. Please welcome the CEO of Churchill Club, Karen Tucker.
Thank you. Thank you so very much. Welcome, everybody. It's great to see this room full of all of us here tonight. I am Karen Tucker, Churchill Club CEO, and tonight we explore voice and speech technology, where it's headed, how it might reshape our interaction with machines at work, at home, and various other places in and around the world. Am I doing okay here on this? It's all about that's a bit inopportune. It is really all about voice, isn't it?
Check.
Well, we definitely want to talk about the opportunities that are represented by the trends today for innovation and for economic growth, and I know that our speakers are well positioned to do that. We have Martin Stoddart, Principal Director Webscale Services from Accenture, here to lead the conversation with Sam Liang, CEO and founder of AISense, Bill Mark, President of Information and Computing Sciences, SRI International, where a lot of this began, Tony Reed, VP Alexa Experience and Echo Devices from Amazon, and Javier Soltero, Corporate Vice President of Cortana from Microsoft. So we really thank our speakers for taking the time to be with us tonight. We also want to give a huge thanks to Accenture for their partnership in developing this program and making it possible. Thank you so much, Accenture. A few words about Churchill Club. We have proudly served as one of the premier stages to talk about innovation, economic growth, and societal benefit for over 3 decades of remarkable growth here in the Silicon Valley region of innovation. We present about 24 programs per year, varying from topic-driven programs like this to sometimes CEOs come marching through, or we have annual programs as well. And we always ask our speakers to think of themselves as building on knowledge that's already readily available and never to pitch or promote or position. And we always appreciate that very much when they follow our advice. If you're not already following us, we invite you to do so on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, and the hashtag tonight, by the way, is simply Churchill Club. So thank you very much for your attention, and let's now welcome our speakers for our discussion about voice. Thank you.
Sam took the expressway.
Yeah. I used to be able to see you, but now there's a giant light now.
Okay, good evening, everyone. My name is Martin Stoddart. Can everyone hear me okay? So I'm just going to say a couple of words just to set the scene for tonight's conversation, and then we'll do intros, and then we'll launch straight into to the questions, to the discussion. So it's going to be a great topic here this evening. Voice. A couple of things about voice that came to mind when I was thinking about the topic. One is that voice is a very human trait. It's sort of in our DNA. Even before birth, babies in utero start to recognize the voice of the mother. After birth, they start to pick up words. After 7 months, they can recognize expressions based just on words that they're hearing. 12 months, they've got a vocabulary of about 50 words or so. And then in the next 8 months or so, they're learning at a rate of about 1 or 2 words a day. So voice is with us from the start through our lives. Voice is also, when you think about technology, when people think about the future, they think about science fiction, it's usually associated with voice. It's not usually associated with someone typing on the keyboard. Right? It's someone talking to a computer, be it HAL, Knight Rider, be it her, from the Spike Jonze movie. So there's a strong association with voice being the future. Now, we've made incredible progress over the last 3 or 4 years, and it feels like we're reaching an inflection point in terms of voice. there's a number of underlying technologies that are driving the advances forward. You think about cloud services, you think about advances in machine learning, advances in near-field and far-field technology. A number of things are coming together to empower and drive the rise of voice at the moment. Nevertheless, it's still early days, right? So despite the fact that there are going to be maybe 50 million smart speakers, thereabouts, shipped this year, and maybe the install base might be getting up towards 100 million. Those are large numbers, but they're still small compared to smartphones and PCs, where we're talking about the penetration and the shipment rates, the penetration's up in the billions. So great progress, plenty more to come though. And really for the focus for this evening, we're going to be looking to the future. And we're going to be talking about the future through three major lenses, three areas that we'll talk about. So one is thinking about the product and the technology itself that's driving these services. The second is going to be thinking about the customers and the end users and their expectations and their requirements. And the third thing that we're going to talk about is thinking about how does the business model come into this, and where does money get made? Does it get made? And how should it get made when we think about voice? So that's the format. What we're going to do now is we're just going to do quick introductions. We'll go down the line. Each panelist just say a few words about themselves, and then we'll start the conversation. Sam.
Thank you, Martin. My name is Sam. I'm the co-founder and CEO of AISense. We are probably the only company you have never heard about. Definitely the smallest, and hopefully we'll grow. Just quick background about myself. I didn't always work on voice. I used to work on location. I was the lead of a Google Map location service for a while, and our team actually invented the blue dot on Google Mobile Maps. So I might have seen your location before, although I don't know who you are. Since a few years ago, I got fascinated by voice. So we started this company in Palo Alto, and right now we're based in Los Altos. So we're a small startup. We're building this new technology called ambient voice intelligence. Definitely, we want to really understand human-to-human conversations, which is also a little different than some of the other products like Siri or Alexa or Cortana. We think that everybody is talking to other human beings a lot every day in meetings, phone calls, video conferences. Can we build a product that make that type of conversations or meetings more effective, and also help people remember things and search things and improve the effectiveness of conversation? So I'll definitely talk more about that.
Right.
Bill Mark. I run the Information and Computing Sciences part of SRI International. SRI International is a research company. R&D is our business. We have about 2,000 people. About 250 of them work in information and computing sciences, which is my area. We do lots of cool research, but for here, I think it's important to know historically, we created the company Nuance, which became the leader in speech recognition. We created the company Siri, that was acquired by Apple, in case you hadn't noticed. We have another company based in New York called Casisto, which is doing kind of the next generation of conversational interaction for mobile banking. And we're very interested in the evolution of speech as a way to interact with computers. We think there's a long way to go. We're interested not only in recognizing what people say, but also how they're feeling, who they are, how they're interacting with other people in the world. So we care a lot about speech.
I'm Tony Reed. I work at Amazon.com. I've been there about 20 years. I've been working on the Alexa and Echo business for about 5 years now. We launched the Alexa voice service and Echo in November of 2014. It seems like just yesterday. And so I run a core experiences team. We look forward in the future around what we want to drive from a customer experience North Star. We try to express that in ways in which we're trying to invent and simplify the lives of customers. I'm responsible for our international expansion efforts. We've been very active in trying to get Alexa accessible globally. We're operating in 10 countries today.
And I'm Javier Soltero, Corporate Vice President for Cortana for Microsoft. Spooky ringtone. Well done. I've been with Microsoft for about 3 years. I'm actually a local here. I've had to address that a few times. Everyone's like, how's Seattle? I'm like, I go there all the time, but I live here.
It's cold and rainy.
It's cold and rainy. And these are all clean. Everyone wears flannel, listens to Nirvana on vinyl. It's weird. Also, pro tip, Seattle's best coffee, not the best coffee in Seattle. So I joined Microsoft 3 years ago as part of the acquisition of a company that I started called Accompli. Accompli is now called Outlook Mobile. So those of you who have iPhones and Android devices and use Outlook on your phone, that was the product that we built and the product I was involved with until recently. Joined the Cortana team about a little over a month ago. And the way I got there was because as part of my time in the Office product division, first starting with Outlook and later more broadly in helping shape the future of our productivity business, I got very interested in the subject of voice, right? And came at this from the point of view of like, well, we've been in productivity, we have all these products that people use every day to communicate, share ideas, describe plans, all these things used by billions of people around the world. And yet there's new ways of interacting with technology that are showing up that are very interesting. And as part of asking too many questions, next thing you know, I get asked, hey, we would like to have you come over and bring all the sort of experience that you have in productivity into our Cortana product. Cortana has a significant voice component, but at the same time is really aiming to be an artificial intelligence powered assistant for users. Our mission in life is to help people do more with their time. And as we look at voice and the role that it plays in enabling people that are otherwise occupied and have their hands and eyes potentially focused on something else, it's been really, really interesting for me and I think for us as a company to see that an opportunity that we've been looking at and in many ways innovating on for decades plays such an integral role, I guess, in helping people feel a stronger connection with the technology that they use. But the more important part, and the part that I think we'd all probably agree still needs to happen is, well, okay, there's things that are convenient, and then there's things that are truly helpful, right? So this idea of using the term assistant, I guess, is something we wind up thinking a lot about, is in terms of what is the reward for me using, whether it's voice-based or otherwise. Like, are you actually helping me live a better life, do more with less, that sort of thing? Make more money, go home early. That's the
Say that again.
Most people, this is a great way to generalize everybody, want two very simple things in life. They want to make more money and they want to go home early, right? And so if you talk about assistance, no, that's a gross simplification. I think people, when they talk about achievement, right, that's our mission. Microsoft aims to empower people and organizations around the world to achieve more. Everyone has a different definition of that, and so AI and voice-powered experiences, they play an interesting role in helping make that happen.
Yep. Great. Well, thanks for the introduction. Let's get into the questions. Easy one to start with should be. I think it's an easy one to start with. So voice has been around for a few years now, 3, 4, 5 years. Let's fast forward 2 or 3 years into the future. What do you think are going to be, and the first one is going to be to Javier, if you don't mind. I'll start with you.
Sure.
What do you think are going to be the in 2 or 3 years, what are the big breakthroughs that you expect to see with voice and whether you would like to see? They may not be the same thing.
Sure. I think the breakthrough that I'm most excited about is watching people develop a sense of a true relationship with a voice-driven agent of any kind, right? And there's going to be many of them, right? There are already many of them today. And so to the extent that people stop treating it as just a computer that happens to have a voice and truly develop some type of emotional attachment to it, which is possible. We have a team in China doing an AI-powered, more entertainment-focused assistant called Xiaoai. People have a real relationship with Xiaoai. She's in the news. She does the weather. It's been interesting, the two sides of that, to see that in that market, with the expectation initially about being in sort of entertainment-driven experience, people have come to have affection and sort of appreciation for this, completely computer-powered experience. So I'd say when we start seeing that happen more broadly around the world, and with all the cultural differences that have to be accounted for, that'd be one. And I think the second one is when we truly figure out and hone in on exactly when is voice truly the better choice, right? Not everything is best experienced through a voice interaction. And I think we tend as an industry often to, sort of pivot very hard into, hey, that looks good, voice all the things, right? And not everything is, I don't know how I would narrate an Excel spreadsheet to you. You probably don't want me to, right?
Let's spend a few minutes.
Yes, row C. I guess I'd add a third one, which is all kidding aside. There's so much to learn, and certainly for me at least, the experience of learning about the role voice plays from an accessibility standpoint has been incredibly eye-opening for me. The role that people that have sight impairments, other difficulties in interacting with technology in a regular, sort of in the way that the rest of us experience it, becomes a very clarifying experience, I guess, to ask somebody, to mentally model in their mind something that you can see. And so I think navigating through that is going to be very interesting, and it's going to produce experiences we cannot really describe well today.
Anyone else?
Yeah. So first of all, when you talk about a 2 to 3 year time frame and you talk about breakthroughs, the breakthroughs must have already happened if they're going to be having impact in 2 to 3 years. So really the question is, what are the economic drivers that are going to make that happen? So I think that a huge thing that's already happening is now called the IoT, Internet of Things. So we're talking about voice, but we have to realize that if we look at human-spoken interaction, human-to-human spoken interaction is not just voice. We gesture, we have facial expressions, we have things like that. So in the next 2 to 3 years, I think that's going to be a much bigger factor in our interaction in some environments like cars that are already have heavy sensors in them, homes as well. Something that I would like to see happen, I'm not sure is going to happen in the 2 to 3 year time frame, would be real conversational interaction. So most of the systems out there now, including Siri and Cortana, are really designed for one shot or maybe just a few step kind of conversation, and that's cool. They're very useful. People love it. I do. But if you really want to get something done, you're going to want to have a conversation, because you're expecting your conversational partner to participate and actually be your helper in solving a problem. So that's the next stage, and we have the technology to do that. Whether we have the economic drivers in 2 to 3 years, we'll see.
I'll just add to that. I think some of the stuff we see and that we're looking forward to is starting to be more human-like. And so some of the stuff mentioned, emotion, when you're having a conversation, there's a concept of memory, a history I have with you, so I can kind of predict some of that discussion. You can take shortcuts in a conversation. And I think the other thing that we will start to see is even more mainstream usage, even though there are tens of millions of users out there today. I think you'll see even more users and coming from different demographics. We've hit on and seen really positive responses from customers with maybe certain disabilities or impairments. We see individuals who are not as fluent with technology take to voice in a way that's made it very simple for them. And so I think you'll continue to see this momentum as more and more people start to use voice technology, they get more familiar with it. I think you'll just start to see that take off a bit more as a network effect. As they start to refer it, they buy these devices or experiences for their family members.
Right. Sam?
We think about actually, Bill just mentioned human-to-human conversation. That's the part actually we are more interested in. There are definitely a lot of companies like Amazon, Microsoft, Google, or Apple are working really hard on the human-to-machine interaction, and all the products already in the market. And as a startup, actually, we're trying to do something quite different, and which can also be controversial, in the sense that, how do we, again, understand human-to-human conversations? If you think about it, although, all those voice assistants are really getting more and more popular now, but just think about how many minutes or how many hours do you talk to a voice assistant every day, compared to how many minutes or hours do you talk to other human beings. And that's what we're doing right now. We can easily talk for 60 minutes, 75, an hour and a half. So we think we definitely want to devote more resources on facilitating that kind of interaction between human beings. In 2 to 3 years, we think the voice metric technology will be even more advanced, in the sense that by listening to the voice, we can quickly tell who is talking. There are about 200 people here. If I meet somebody who I might have met 3 years ago, I may not be able to recognize their face because their face may have changed. But once they start talking, maybe my phone or my Apple Watch or my other wearable devices tell me immediately, oh, this is Karen. You met Karen 5 years ago.
She hasn't changed a bit, actually.
So that's one of the things, to use voice to recognize the person and even the personality. And within seconds, maybe my my Apple Watch or my cell phone tell me, based on the voice, who is this person? What's the LinkedIn profile? What does he or she do? That'll help me talk to her or him better.
So part, thank you, part of what's coming up then is notion of conversation and the notion of what makes a conversation. And if my memory serves me right, memory is a key part of that. Can you get to a reliable memory without it always being on?
Well, yes. So when you say memory, I assume you mean keeping track of conversational context.
Yeah.
Which people are just spectacularly good at doing. So the human conversation is actually very, very sophisticated. I usually give banking examples because of our Casisto startup, but just one little interaction. I want to put some money in an account, and the teller says from which account, and I say, how much do I have in savings? Okay, well, that's not an answer to the question. It makes perfect conversational sense. Everybody in the room knows exactly what I'm doing. But if I were talking to a computer system, it would have to know something about banking, and it would have to know that that was a reasonable conversational move. So I don't think it's a question of just being always on. I think it's a question of modeling what happens in conversations and being on during the period in which the conversation happens.
Agree? Okay. Or Sam?
I'd say I agree, and I think that the part that worries me is as an industry, again, we often want to make these, we visualize these big leaps in terms of how these things evolve and start showing up in all of our living rooms, right? And for something like that, right, like that rich sense of conversational context, that can't be described as an end state. It's just something that we'll make sort of almost incremental steps towards. One place where that manifests itself today, which I think we would all agree is an area that needs much more improvement, is in any kind of, as soon as you break out beyond the default capabilities of what one of these voice experiences can provide, and you get into the world of skills or sort of additional capabilities that it has, mentally, actually the user has this challenge of not knowing necessarily what are you asking it, what can it do, what did you ask it to do. Okay, so I'm asking you a question about banking because I've invoked some banking skill, but does that mean I can still ask you questions? Can I still ask you to set a pasta timer for 12 minutes? Like, and so observing, I guess, and in many ways just letting people sort of discover their way through this and learning from that is how we will hopefully over time get to that much more natural contextual piece.
But I think there are some small incremental ways you can get there. You know, simple examples such as, you know, for us, we would say, you know, Alexa, play that song I was listening to last night. To me, that's a simple use case of memory. Or what is that song I keep, you know, asking for? My daughter keeps playing. And so there are these small examples that you can build with the existing technology that is there today that starts to get customers used to that experience as well. Right. And they expect that. They actually, as they start to develop more fluency with using voice and a technology, it's actually quite easy. The expectation, you know, when they start, they just try what you would say to a human, and now the technology is constrained in a way so that they get their boundaries reset. But they will keep exploring, and so I think there's, I look for teams and developers to sort of invent these incremental features and delighters for customers in a very quick manner.
If I may, actually I really want things to be always on because, you know, while I'm getting old, I keep forgetting things. You know, for all the people who work in enterprises, you know, you definitely have a lot of meetings. Sometimes, you know, I have 3 meetings in a row, but at the end of the last meeting, you know, I already forget, you know, what I promised people to do in the first meeting. So I want my phone or any system to just capture that and remember that for me, and just put that into, generate my action items and put that into my, my calendar. And also in this kind of situation, I will probably meet 20 or 30 people. You know, we exchange business cards and I ask, what do you do? They tell me, you know, they work on voice or AI, but, you know, after 10 other people, I already forget what the first person told me. So I'd love to have a system that's always on that help me remember all the things I have heard. So it's actually interesting that, you know, with all the search capability, you can search, you know, your email 10 years ago, but you can't search anything you heard an hour ago. So, you know, can we build that technology and enable that?
Do you think, you mentioned customer expectations, do you think those expectations vary depending upon the circumstance that you're in? If you're in the house versus in the office?
Or somewhere in between, right? Like
the pavement.
It could be Starbucks, it could be in a restaurant, or I run into somebody in the hallway. You know, conversations can happen unexpectedly. So it's hard to plan for that.
So many of these voice-driven experiences happen in public places, not just public, like they're public inside in a shared room in your house. And that, I think, affects a lot of how people perceive failure in these types of products as well, right? Because you're so used to using your voice and this kind of familiarity that we have, as you said in your opening remarks, about how and from the very, very beginning of our life on this planet, we know that verbal communication is extremely useful, very rich, expressive. And so when you try to use that with something, and you're using sort of a natural, tool that you've had, and it doesn't work, and then you're also amongst other people, like it turns out people wind up blaming themselves, and they think, well, I did something wrong, or you create this anxiety. I refer to it as interaction anxiety. Here's something that isn't sort of self-describing. So unlike every other piece of technology that I have that has pixels and buttons and stuff, it's an experience that is an ambient device by nature. And you're trying to talk to it to get it to do useful stuff. You're trying to get a relationship going with this to understand its capabilities. And so when you fail, you feel sort of almost like it's your fault.
And shouting never helps, does it?
No.
Yeah, it turns out, and
Never helps.
you could get really creative as a designer of these types of products and actually get very cheeky and do all kinds of stuff. Restraint is a very important thing to exercise. But it is part of creating a relationship. I think people ultimately appreciate the idea that, yes, it's a piece of technology, but it needs to have a personality. It needs to be expressive. It needs to, over time, kind of adjust ideally to how I want to interact with it and so forth. And we are well on our way. The breakthroughs, this all seems like it happened yesterday, but this is all built on work that has been going on for decades, right? So,
well, also you're talking about different environments. I would say there's also different relationships with the device. So you're talking about sort of the exploratory behavior that you can achieve with a home device, because people will use it again and again. It's their device, it's their home. They may have taught it some things, they may know that it works. That's very different than going into a different environment and having a speech interaction with a device that is not yours. So you don't have the same set of expectations. And I think we as a community need to do a better job about designing the experience that cues people what the system can deal with so that they don't get that anxiety and so that they can have a good experience.
I mean, I can tell you one of our challenges is what we talk about as discovery of the capabilities that Alexa can do. It's hard in a device. The devices with screens, it becomes easier. You have something to display, but and most of our devices with no screens, they are ambient. They're designed to disappear. And how do you teach customers all the new capabilities? And we're rolling out new skills daily, and so then you have failure cases. So a customer may ask to try something. We can't do it today, but tomorrow we roll out this capability. But the customer may not come back and ask again. They failed, and so I do agree with this around expectations, but customers are also kind of learning about how to navigate this and then how to keep trying, because either keep trying in how you're phrasing it or keep trying in different time frames.
So you mentioned one aspect that might be holding customers back, then, this notion of trying again or just abandoning the whole effort. What else do we think is holding customers back at the moment from using it more, or from just jumping in to voice? Anyone?
I don't think they do very much yet. I think there's a lot. I mean, Sam in particular was talking about human-human interaction, all the things we get done through talking to other people. And yes, of course, we talk a lot more to other people than we do to devices. Think about your interactions with people in a retail environment when you're buying something. I already talked about a bank. Healthcare scenarios, buying airline tickets, things like that are quite doable. They're very efficiently doable in terms of spoken interaction. Most systems out there can't do any of that yet.
But are they? So actually the airline one, it's interesting that you cite that one. I would say that there's a range of tasks, and this even predates voice. So we went into this conversationalize all the things. That's twice that I've used that crappy pun. In not everything, you don't necessarily want to go through a multi-turn, hey, I need a flight to Atlanta.
Yep.
What airline would you like to a visual experience allows you to go through that in so much more of an efficient, you can process more information.
You need both.
Yeah.
So I didn't mean to imply, because when I make airline reservations for myself, of course I'm going to be using the screen first.
Right.
But to get the additional information, to understand what happens if I change it and things like that, then you really want a spoken interaction. I was just talking about things that we do with humans that are hard to do right now with systems.
But I wonder though, because if you had a travel agent in a world where travel agencies, still were like the mainstream way in which people book travel, you would call a person. You probably would say very little. Say, hey, I need a flight to Atlanta. They know a lot about you. They come back and say, this is what I got you. So somehow we've kind of...
Well, I won't drag this out, but you probably wouldn't say, they wouldn't say, this is what I've got you, and you say, sure, maybe that happens sometimes. You might say, what are the alternatives to that? What time do I get in? Does this flight late a lot? So that's what I mean by conversational interaction.
So part of what you're saying is the limitations of the service so far just don't do enough. Is that everything though, or is other things holding people back?
Well, I just want to be clear. When you say the limitations of the service, that sounded kind of back-endy to me. But it's what I was talking about before. It's the limitations of conversational capability. Right. You could have a back-end service that could do a whole lot for you, but actually making that spoken interaction work is very hard.
Sam?
I think a lot of the voice products actually are not really taking advantage of a lot of contextual information yet. Because I work on mobile maps, so I'm pretty keen on mobile. How do you combine mobile and voice? When you go to work, you use a different language model or lexicon when you talk to your colleague. But when you go back home, when you talk to your family and your children, you use a different set of words and vocabulary. So actually, the mobile device understands that very well. It knows where you are. It knows what the situation is. It can adjust the acoustic model as well as the language model to better understand what's going on. So so far we haven't seen any products doing that. How do you take advantage of that? You said what hold customers back. I think most of the products still don't understand the customer very well. You have to repeat. You have to say it over and over again. But how do you better understand the human voice? It is still a big challenge. And with background noise, it's pretty quiet right here. But if you go to a restaurant, a Starbucks, it's very noisy there, or in an airport. Can the system do a better job even with that background noise?
I'm going to put something on the table, the metaphorical table, obviously. So you haven't mentioned trust, or as I would say, privacy. Trust or privacy, privacy. How important is that? And does that play a part in the customer mind?
Very important. Sam wants always on. He's thinking about the enterprise. Most people I talk to are a little bit scared of always on. They really worry about whether their home device really only wakes up on the wake up word, or whether it's listening all the time, and what's going on with that. So I think trust is a huge issue.
Tony?
I agree with that. I think it's an education for a lot of people. I think that when you take the time to sort of understand how the system or the technology or the piece of hardware is designed, I know ours very well. And you can talk to customers and walk them through those safeguards. We think very much around privacy, and when we build products, we put that first and foremost, working backwards from the customer. And so, we do things such as giving them choice. We give them transparency. You can see your utterances listed in the app. Customers can delete them. Our hardware has mute buttons that are electronically disabled from the device, and so it has a visual indicator. We have visual indicators when the device is awake and listening, when it's streaming to the cloud. So we thought very carefully about each and every one of these pieces, and I think that but customers have a right to ask these questions and have high expectations of companies on what they're building, and that they have trust and privacy in mind.
And I would agree. I mean, I think the additional bit around trust that I would add is that separate from how you trust a device that could potentially be listening to you and has this unique position in your home or in your office to be able to capture what is going on there, there's also the trust that you end up having to build with it around it doing things for you. So as we make our way past the convenience that we have today around a lot of this into truly proactive, helpful things, when it starts acting on your behalf, when it's coming back to you to say, hey, Javier, you have 3 conflicts tomorrow with your schedule. What do you want to do? Or that sort of experience. You have to trust that you will be able to complete the task that agent, the assistant, is actually asking you to do. In the same vein, for those that have not yet gone on this journey of like trying to experiment with these devices, and I must say that the curiosity that people have with voice is awesome. Something has happened in the last 2 years where people are bringing these all of these devices into their homes. They're curious about it. That is for us as an industry, I think that rarely happens, right? Like that's not something we should ever take for granted. How that trust is built, if it starts with, oh, hey, hi, I'm your new Cortana device, and I'd love to manage everything for you. Can I please start by having you hand over your credit card, all your contacts, all your privacy, please trust me, I'm good. You have to be you have to start from the user back and say, what are you asking for? Why? How do you explain that? You don't want to get into a discussion with the user about, no, here's how the far field mic, works and how wake words work. Like, you'd have to explain a lot of underlying technology in order to build confidence the other way, right? So it's better.
So you've got to earn trust.
Yes.
Gradually over time.
The same way that humans, we just met. You didn't give me your wallet. So, I mean.
How much did you need to borrow?
I mean, they validate parking, so it's good.
Okay. Thank goodness, let me just say.
Yeah.
So one thing that comes up in other contexts, I'm curious as to whether we think it is an issue in the context of voice, is fake content, fake news, fake stuff. Is this something for us to worry about? And if so, paint me a picture of what the context is here.
Well, sure. I mean, so part of it has nothing.
Yes, you take this one, Bill.
Yeah. Part of it has nothing to do with voice interaction.
Agreed.
Right. So if you're getting misinformation from the back end, what's the capital of Nebraska? And you get the wrong answer, fake news.
You're not asking me that, are you?
That's not the fault of the voice system.
Right.
There's other kinds of faking that can go on as we get into more advanced stuff, like making an answer come back in the voice of someone you trust, but it's not really that person. There's that kind of spoofing,
right,
which is coming for sure. So there's lots of things to worry about.
I'll give you a very quick, please.
Okay.
Very quick anecdote. I have a 6-year-old boy, and we have lots of these devices at home, different assistants and all that. And the other day he came over to me crying right before going to bed, and I'm like, what's going on? He said, Bobby, what's the Loch Ness Monster? And I was like, this one is easy. Loch Ness Monster is a story about a dinosaur-looking thing in a lake in Scotland. He's like, I'm scared. I'm like, why? I end up, after going back and forth with him a few times and even asking Cortana, how far are we from Scotland? And she says, hey, it's 5,734 miles. See, I'm like, see? It's far. And he's like, no, that's close. I'm like, okay, relative distance, this is a lot to ask. It's late. In the end, I go for the incisive question of like, is the Loch Ness Monster real? No one answered that correctly. None of them. Not Alexa, not Google, not Cortana, everyone.
You mean they flim-flam?
The answer is no, for anybody who's wondering. So Relative to, okay, I know, sorry. Okay. We could debate, we could teach the controversy later. There is no Loch Ness Monster, not at 7 p.m. when you're about to go to bed. So that's an example of, you mentioned fake news. I would never imagine that I get a chance to tell that story. But sometimes you ask a question and the inability to deliver a definitive answer because the sources of information that power this and our ability to understand the context of the question. I mean, I'm going to go make sure the Cortana engineers are going to fix that one and say no. Anybody asks about the Loch Ness Monster being real, the answer is no. But that would ruin a lot of stuff.
Interesting.
Actually,
that's an interesting one.
You must have dealt with this one already.
We do. It goes into the heart of the personality and how it's a communal device. It's in the home. You assume there are multiple family members, some are children. And so how do you balance some of these factual answers with running the holidays and Christmas for millions of children?
You also have a vested interest in this whole Christmas business going well. So you don't want to, you're like absolutely real, totally real. Put your wish list. Did you update your wish list, Johnny? Right?
That's good.
Sorry,
that was really good.
I'm giving you feature suggestions, Tony.
That's a great one.
And Christmas is real.
Let me give you an anecdote of what happened over Christmas. And I won't get the story exactly right. But there was, we had a trending news story on one of our devices, Echo Show. And it had to do with a mugger in Paris. He was dressed like Santa Claus and he caught a mugger. He was on a scooter and it was this really great story. Except kids saw that and they were, there's a story about Santa Claus who's on a scooter. Isn't he at in France? He's not at the North Pole. And so these are these sort of balances of news and factual information with understanding too that you do have an audience of people who you're a trusted member of the family, an assistant, and you're in the home and sort of understanding those boundaries of how you're expected to behave. If I had a guest and they ruined my children's Christmas by saying Santa Claus isn't real, I probably wouldn't have that guest over again.
And let's be clear, we're not saying that today. I mean, we're not just.
I'm not saying Santa Claus is not real.
I'm not taking a position one way or the other.
Are we on video?
we are, yeah, definitely. Sam, I want to ask a quick question about the market at the moment is we think of the market and we think of big names, big brands, big companies. But obviously there's a part to play for startups in this space. Where are the niches, where are the spaces where you think that startup value is going to grow in this market?
That's a great question. We've been thinking about that for many years. Obviously, we can compete directly against Amazon, Microsoft, or Google. They have much more money, much more PhD than us. However, we do see new markets that those big guys are not looking at. Again, this human-to-human conversation, meetings, phone calls, video conferences. We haven't seen products like that on the market, so we see a huge opportunity there. And we have to think out of the box. There's something unconventional. When we talk about always on, it could be pretty scary for the big guys to do. And as a startup, we can do much more aggressive things, and we can experiment, we can test it. Of course, talking about trust and privacy, we have to take it very seriously. However, it gives us much more room and opportunity and freedom to innovate and to try even controversial things. So, talking about AI, a big barrier for startups is, where do you get data? So obviously, Microsoft, Amazon, Google have huge amount of data, but very different than maybe 5 years ago now. Today, it's actually a huge amount of data available on the internet. we can get creative and we can crawl a lot of free data to train our machine learning engine. So I think we have a good chance to do something interesting.
Good.
Well, I was going to add to that from Amazon's perspective and with Alexa, we have built we've built it as a service. And so we have Alexa Skills Kit and Alexa Voice Service, and that is our way. We love that developers are building, and we fully expect and want to see invention happening through developers outside of our company's walls. That's actually where I think you'll see more interesting inventions. I think teams will push the boundaries because we can't be everywhere. We have limited resources. We have focus areas. We have things that we are good at. And so I think for us, we've done things too on the university side to, get the schools from Alexa Prize kind of generating interest and working on the conversational piece. So we've seeded a lot of this. Alexa Fund is another way that we've done it, which is looking for companies. And so for us, it's important that companies and startups and inventors are really thinking about how do you invent new customer experiences for customers.
We'd love to work with Amazon.
Excuse me, I just wanted to sneak. Before we run out, we're going to run into the Q&A actually in about a couple of minutes. We'll get through one or two more questions, and then we're going to move over to the audience. So just start thinking about what you might want to ask that we haven't covered yet.
I was just going to add, I've already mentioned, I think another place for startups are verticals, where the support is very deep conversations about a specific area. I've mentioned banking, retail is another, healthcare, different parts of healthcare is another, where it's, you can have a platform, but it has to be a platform that can deal with conversation at that level.
Yeah.
We do the same thing in a very small way that Amazon and Microsoft do. We provide a platform, and then our startup companies particularize it for a vertical.
I just wanted to, I said I was going to talk about money. We talked a little bit, you talked about wallet.
You talked about your wallet.
I wanted your wallet. Yeah.
Yes, so we talked about money a little bit, but that wasn't the kind of monetization I was necessarily thinking of. When we think about voice services at the moment, there's really no overt or direct money changing hands over these services. Again, thinking forward 2 or 3 years, is that going to stay that case, or is money going to seep into this somehow, and if so, in what form?
Well, I think money has seeped into it. If you think about the experience, a large part of it are built on services, and so you have Spotify, Pandora. We have Skills, Domino's Pizza, Starbucks, and so there's a commerce angle or subscription. It could be any of those. For Amazon itself, we have Kindle books, Audible, Amazon Music Unlimited, video, et cetera. So we have our own business units that are revenue generating, and that has been our approach, working backwards, which is the services themselves are making up the experience and they're voice enabled.
Also, when Siri was introduced on the Apple iPhone sales went way up. Maybe not only because of Siri, but that was a big monetization play. And the original business plan for the Siri startup, not what Apple did, was very similar of sort of back-end referrals. So if you use a Siri interaction to use this kind of pizza, Siri gets some money.
Right, right.
Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead. As long as you provide value, people are willing to pay. We just saw Dropbox IPO. What they provide is storage and the synchronization and collaboration. Voice here is the same thing. We actually just launched a new product called Otter that help people remember meetings, search meetings, and share meetings. I think, just similar to Dropbox, Evernote, Slack, people are willing to pay for a monthly subscription. If you can save them some time, there are statistics saying that 37% of corporate employees' time are spent in meetings. Actually, just this weekend, I met a senior product manager from Amazon. She said she actually, had to have like 4 or 5 meetings every day, and after that, she has to spend another hour or two to compile meeting notes. So, if this voice product can help them save, 30 minutes every day, that's worth a lot of money.
Let me, I guess, do a second version of this, a more direct version of this, which is ad-free. Will it always be ad-free?
Say yes.
I can see we have no plans to
we
have
don't.
advertising.
I think it comes down to that phrase that somebody came up with about you are not the product, right? And it goes back to the issue of trust, right? Like if you're inviting these devices, these experiences into your home and giving them access to all this information about you, allowing them to get to know you in an effort to allow them to work on your behalf, that's a privileged position to be in, and it's certainly one that people, if you demonstrate sufficient value, which we all aim to do and are all doing, that people will pay for it, right? I'm glad actually that this voice renaissance, if you will, or that the advent of all these new experiences has shown up at a time when people are already accustomed. We're past the everything on the internet is free business. Remember that? Like there was a time when there was just an expectation, right, that content had to be free, that everything, there was no way to build, other than e-commerce, there was no other way to monetize these services. And so that's no longer true. And, I think that assuming that we get really good at making it clear what reward the user is getting by you relying on these experiences, on these products, then it's great. And that the business models that evolve around it, everyone wants developers we want people to build great businesses on top of Cortana, on top of the entire Microsoft 365 platform, in the same way that everybody who's in this game with their own particular angle on it would like to do. So I want to come back to the startup thing. I mean, my experience is as an entrepreneur, pretty much 95% of my career. There's always opportunity. We need people to bring their creativity, to help bring their point of view into these experiences so that we arrive at the right answer. All of us, and certainly I would say Amazon, Microsoft, Google, are in this very interesting balance of evolving a product experience while delivering a platform capability, through that. And there is no way that we're going to get everything right, or that we're going to be great and actually, more importantly, awesome at everything. We need everybody else to sort of come in and deliver that. And if there's no path to making real money and being successful, whether you're an independent, small startup software developer, or you aspire to be, a bigger company, this is it's important to get this right.
Yep. All right, I think we're probably going to segue to Q&A, if that's okay.
Sure.
Yeah. I'm assuming there's a few questions out there. Yes, we're going to start. The first hand was right at the back, gentleman with the white shirt.
Hey, hi. I'm Shaunak. I'm the founder of Emma AI. We're building an interpretable AI for the financial markets. So my question is, and to articulate it better, I'm reading it out. So DARPA has this program called XAI, right? It's essentially a version of like interpretable AI. Now going back to your earlier comment about maintaining conversational context, do you think explainable AI, whether that's in form of like LSTMs for text or CNNs plus LSTMs for captioning in text in conversational form, does that offer a better experience for consumers, regardless of which AI it is, like Alexa or Siri or whatever? And by extension, does that also provide a foundation for algorithms, especially unsupervised learning algorithms, to be like regulated from a policy level perspective? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Wow, that's the first question. This is going to be a long night.
I'll try to
Tony.
I'd like
We
to
talked about this.
I'd like to summarize the question, but
Yeah.
maybe I'll just turn it to the.
I was going to answer.
Yeah, go Bill.
Go
Bill's
Bill.
got this one.
I was going to answer the first 2 of the 4 questions. So we're actually part of that explainable AI program. It's looking at how to render all of the statistical stuff that goes on in a neural net in a form that human beings can understand. I think that's a very small slice of what we need to do. I do not think it's a general framework for conversational context. To the second part that you were getting into, I think we're a long way from using purely statistical means to build up that kind of context, but that's pretty debatable. I'd be happy to talk to you afterwards about it.
I'd add that in terms of having people, and this is actually not even about AI necessarily, is like giving people the ability to see how much information has been captured about them and how that information is then sort of applied into these trained models. That is, as the gentleman who asked that question very aptly displayed, it's a dense topic. Yeah. So I think it's more important for us to operate in a way that is transparent and that allows people access to the data, that we build this trust relationship in a way that, people have more control over what information they're providing to these services, how to manage it, and now we now have regulation in the form of GDPR, all these other big things that are making that happen, I think, in a good way. It's going to clarify, I think, a lot of this without forcing people to get PhDs in CNNs and
Not that that's
DNNs.
a bad thing.
No, it's a great thing. But those of you who've worked hard to get one should be glad that not everybody has one. That's.
I guess a big part of that, data trust and whether you can collect the data or not is can you use that data to generate value for yourself? To better serve you, the system needs to understand you better. Then how does the system understand you better? It has to collect more data. As long as, I don't think it's a question whether we should collect the data or not. It's a question about the access control. Who can get access to that data? If you have full control for the user to control the access, then, I guess you should, you will be able to trust the system better. And just the one example, nobody has brought it up yet. I imagine if our system just listened to me all the time, it actually can detect my emotion. It can sense when I'm depressed. When I'm talking less for a week, maybe something is wrong. Maybe you should just tell my doctor about it. Between your health and privacy, maybe I should just want to leave a little longer, as long as my privacy is preserved. So, can you resolve that tension between data collection and control?
Next question.
We can't see you, sir.
Yes, you're.
You're right below the lights.
Yeah. So the question is about use cases in the enterprise.
But we'll repeat it. It's all right.
I think
we can hear you.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Can you see me now?
Yeah, it's fine.
Sort of.
Can you hear me now? Now, that's better. So the question is about use cases in the enterprise. If I heard right, there were at least a couple mentioned, such as making meetings more productive. That's a fantastic one. And perhaps the interactions with airline reservation systems could be another one. So my question is, particular to the enterprise, and some of you mentioned verticals, go after verticals. Could you suggest some use cases that are particular to the enterprise in any vertical of your choice?
Well, I can give you one. It's a slightly different vertical, but hotels. So imagine you have a voice assistant in this hotel, in your hotel room. And when I check in, maybe I can check in through a device, a voice assistant, or More likely is when I get to the room, there's a voice assistant. I can order room service. I can turn on the TV. I don't have to learn a new remote control in every hotel I go to. And so that's one real example. You have others. Productivity is one, enterprise and the workplace. That one's rich for applications, video calling, sending messages.
Just a specific one. Most salespeople in enterprises don't like interacting with Salesforce to fill out what they're supposed to do in Salesforce. So automating that through voice is an example.
Generally, the task of finding information, expertise, of finding people in an enterprise setting is a rich area. You have a domain-specific knowledge stored potentially in a lot of different places. You have intelligence that rides on top of that domain-specific knowledge that might be specific to you, right? So there may be 17 Stevens in the Microsoft corporate directory. There's probably a lot more now. But if you say, hey, call Steven, right? The idea that it would know who that, like who is truly the important person for you, or you ask it some potentially eccentric question with lots of internal jargon about, hey, when's the next CQR? That's the kind of thing that in a workplace setting, to disambiguate that question and apply sort of the terminology that's specific to that enterprise is one part of the challenge. The other one is just being able to quickly respond with the information, say it's Tuesday, right? So lots and lots of use cases for the enterprise. For sure.
And I presume another use case is any enterprise setting where the user has their hands full or is occupied doing something else.
Yeah, I mean, you can take almost any situation vertical and walk through a day in the life of that user, customer, human, and say, how would you disrupt this with voice? How do you make it easier? How do you save them time? How are you more accurate? Take the medical setting. Healthcare, doctors, nurses, hospitals, take, homes for elderly. There's a companionship component to it. Each of these verticals has, I think, incredible potential to build voice applications. And you can do that today, even with the limitations in the system not being conversational. You can have a meaningful improvement to experiences with voice assistants today.
Another complementary element to that is when you talk about things like mixed reality, right? So you have your hands and eyes are occupied, you're servicing a complex machine. The ability to use voice as well as a visual element that is going to help you accomplish the task. We've, with HoloLens and the work we've done in mixed reality, we've seen, voice is an integral part of the HoloLens experience, and it's very powerful. I mean, it allows people to do a lot more.
Again, I mentioned earlier, people in enterprise spend tons of time on meetings, and meetings are actually extremely expensive. Every hour you can calculate how many dollars
there's so much fun though, right?
on meeting, and people go off agenda. They argue, and at the end of the meeting, we don't know what the action items are. And one interesting example is this company called Bridgewater. It's one of the biggest hedge funds in the world. They have this radical transparency principle. They record all their meetings and share with each other. And I think the sharing is a big part of the collaboration, right? A lot of busy people here, and I'm sure every day your schedule is very full. You cannot go to all the meetings, but if other people just share the meeting summary with you, and if your AI can summarize the meeting, and within a couple minutes, you get the gist of the meeting, just to save you a lot of time.
I thought you were going to say the AI could keep control of the meeting.
Oh, that will be the next step. Yeah, okay, just inject the agenda into the AI assistant first.
You're off point.
Then it will listen, and when you go.
But you mentioned Bridgewater, and that great book, by the way, the Principles by Ray Dalio mentions this in detail. The trick there is that actually is a choice they made, right? So there's a very specific cultural element in that company, as there are in just about every large organization, not just companies, about how they go about their business. And I think there's a very tricky line, I guess, to where how prescriptive can an AI-based experience, a voice-powered AI experience, be in terms of enforcing we record every meeting here, and except for this one, right? Like some of those things end up getting. It's the AI's job, I guess, to figure out a way to make itself work within your set of, or for you to pick one that matches, I guess, the qualities that you value in terms of not just personally, but even organizational.
Right. I do like the idea of the AI producing the minutes before the meeting. Would probably be even better, actually.
Yes, well, why not?
Skip it.
Get that out of the way.
Just have the AI solve the problem, not have the meeting.
Exactly. Okay, next question.
Hi, my name is Kathy Jory. I'm with Mozilla and the IoT team in emerging technologies. So one of the questions we have, we want to make it easy for people to use their Internet of Things. One question is, can we do it privately in our own home without having things go out? We think yes. And the second thing is commercial bias. So there's a few companies that are really good with the big data in the cloud of, processing your natural language. And is it going to stay as a hardware-specific thing where when my smart washing machine needs more detergent, I'm directed one way toward getting that commercial refill? So how do we separate the software platform from the hardware? What are the big companies thinking about in terms of commercial biases so that me as a user, like our strategy with IoT is to bring it to the web as a web service first, openly, same API, and have all the device makers like, here's the thing, and then how does that get connected to commercial services? Because sometimes I want to know where's a better price, what's a better deal, what's delivered faster, and at other times, I don't know. So
the core question, I think the core question is the one around bias, right?
Yeah.
And it's how do we avoid a biased future?
How do we avoid commercial bias?
Yeah. How do we avoid a biased future?
I mean, if you want to take this first?
Well, I was going to take the first, but it wasn't hitting at the bias, because I heard another question in there, which is around, I'll tell you our approach and around IoT and smart home has been, we try to pull everything up to the cloud that we can, not on the device. And we do that through a set of APIs, and we work with all the third parties to enable connection into those APIs. And so we want to do that globally. We'd love to have all manufacturers or device makers working off that set of APIs.
Right. So lucky for us, Microsoft and Amazon are working on the early parts of understanding how we can both, deliver our respective value to our users through different types of devices. I'll disappoint you early by saying I'm not going to tell you what the answer is, because as you probably live every day, this is a very sort of, it's a difficult space to navigate. When you're a platform provider, if you really are a platform provider and you're very service driven, right? So we're not saying, hey, go drop special magical bits inside of every possible device that has Cortana or Alexa in it. I think architecturally you're at least pointed in the right direction. For us, because we're not in the sort of same kind of commerce world that Amazon is in, I think your question would probably land at like, do you have a preference for certain kinds of, like, you have OneDrive, except that I use Dropbox. Like, does that mean that Cortana won't work with Dropbox? And the good news is that, and this answer may have been different 5+ years ago, today, Microsoft understands that there are lots of choices, that actually consumer choice, at least for me, and I tell the team this all the time, that's the most powerful and clarifying force we could ever tap into, is understanding that people have multiple choices for the kind of services they want to rely on, and whether they're experiencing them through a voice interface, through Cortana, or in any other form because they're using Word, and that needs to save to Dropbox or Windows itself. Yes, we want our experience to be better, but that doesn't mean that we have to like close doors and sort of make it hard for anybody else. That is a losing proposition across the board. So I think for Microsoft at least, we understand the role of the ecosystem plays here and are aiming to be very open. We also have different layers at which you can interact with us, right? Like there's a Cortana API, and then there's also Bot Framework, Lewis, a lot of our cognitive services APIs that allow you, in a sense, to almost build a agent of your own, if that's what you want. So you have the raw materials as well, and I think Amazon has similar.
We have the same thing.
Yeah.
We have Lex, which is the raw materials, or Alexa voice service you can use.
Yeah.
The Alexa Skills Kit, it's made up of thousands of developers. We have shopping providers on that platform as well, not just Amazon.
So just to give this a little voice angle, because these problems exist whether you're interacting with voice or some other way, just imagine the system being ready to say something like, I use OneDrive instead of Dropbox system, and have it understand that. So the vocabulary has to be there, the underlying semantics have to be there to support that kind of interaction.
And then there's also the generic, hey, I need a file, and maybe I have multiple places
right. And you
that
don't know
have
where
that
it
file.
is. You don't care where it is.
Yeah, exactly. So that also can happen, and I think that home automation has some aspects of that, right? Like there's a concept of rooms that is, potentially has multiple IoT devices hanging from it that are from different providers. So we're very early in this, right? Like users will tell us, hopefully, how they want to see this evolve.
Next question.
Great question.
Yeah, very good question. Next question.
To your right.
No, sorry,
I don't have the mic.
I do want to appreciate the irony of someone from Microsoft saying to someone from Mozilla that we would never lock out a
my
product.
first job was at Netscape, my friend.
I know
so
that.
I have to disappoint you.
For the younger people in the room, there was a whole antitrust case
Yeah.
about that. And I want to get to the trust and privacy issue that we touched on earlier on. Because you said maybe that doesn't have too much to do with speech, but if your goal is actually to build an intelligent agent that a person gets a relationship with, then they are attributing to it a great deal more trust than they are to other things in their lives because of this relationship. And so that if their speech buddy lies to them or it can be corrupted against them, it's actually more significant than in non-speech circumstances, possibly. To go further, you mentioned that the Echo, for example, has lights on it and say when it's transmitting. But if one were to reflash the firmware in it, that could be changed, that behavior, unless you actually have, very few of these devices actually have that encoded at such a level that it can't be changed by reflashing. So now that we're looking at a world where foreign governments are deliberately targeting individuals by their profiles, attempting to do surveillance on them, attempting to manipulate them by using as much data, compromising companies or at least abusing the contracts these companies have with their suppliers. Now that we're in this world, how will these intelligent speech agents that we put into our homes with 4 lovely microphones with excellent sound recording capability, how will they react to that?
Well,
probably the people on the left want to answer that, and the people on the right don't. But.
Well, you mentioned a couple of different threats. So there's basic sort of cyber attack, I'll call it that way, kind of threats, which are absolutely there, and all we can do is what we do with everything we build, which is to try to make it safer, try to thwart that kind of attack. It's a constant battle back and forth.
Well, but you're making the most trusted device, maybe, that I do.
Well, so I was going to go there. So you also made the statement that if I have a spoken interaction, I may develop a trust relationship with whatever that is somehow different from relationships that I have with other devices in my home. I think that that's perfectly possible. And then I think we would have to look at human trust relationships and how we build them and how they decline over time. So if you trust someone and they lie to you, you change your model of that and so forth. And I don't think there is any better answer than having humans be aware of what's going on and to not be overly trusting. So we have both ends of the spectrum working very hard right now. One is not enough trust. People are scared to death of some of these systems when they absolutely shouldn't be. Then we have people who trust way too much. Oh, it came from the internet, it must be true, right? So we have to find the middle. Some of the exploratory things that we were talking about earlier, I think, are a way to get there. And in human relationships, you don't automatically start trusting someone. We talked about that before. So how do we build trust? And what happens when trust is damaged? How do we repair that?
And I'll just go back to, what I said earlier, which for us, it's around customer transparency and control. And it is one way to build that trust and to have customers be able to understand what's happening in a situation and be able to access and remove their data to see what that interaction was. And so I think in all of these kind of new features and new developments, I think the builders should have that in mind, which is give the customers choice and give them transparency.
We are trusted by individuals, organizations, and governments around the world with the most sensitive data, both from a personal perspective as well as just in every possible dimension. The responsibility that Microsoft has around its role as a trusted provider and a trusted steward of information is something that we not only never take for granted, but we never assume that we have somehow reached a place where we're good, right? Like we live with a clear acceptance that every day anything can happen, right? And so from a technology perspective, you have the ability through architecture, relying more heavily on a service that we control, making smarter choices about device architectures and so forth, that you can, let's say, constrain the problem to some degree, right? And we are invested, at least at Microsoft, certainly from silicon all the way up to the bits that run on top of it, custom chips, you name it. The other side of that, of course, is what Bill mentioned, which is this idea of like, are you guiding the user through an experience that reassures them, and are you not asking too early? Like we all have, I want to get in a self-driving car too, but I just don't want to get in it until it's like for sure safe, right? The leap that we all have to take to trust technology to that degree is really important. And we actually, as a company, have to be very, you can't just be, I don't know, I just make stuff. You brought it into your house, like good luck, right? Like we have to have a presence and a relationship with that user throughout so that we can reassure them about, hey, this is how your data is being used, provide them transparency, control, all that kind of stuff. So it's a very, very important question and something that I don't think anybody who pretends to answer that definitively is basically not telling the truth.
Just one very small point regarding trust. And a big part of trust is about authentication. And Bill just mentioned how do you trust your friend? Why do you trust your friend? One big part of that is because you know the history of your friend. So when they come to you, based on the history, you know what they're telling you, whether what they're telling you is true or not. So it's actually another argument why we want to get the data as long as it's safe and protected and encrypted everything. And actually, you can use that history to authenticate anybody. It's really hard to fake the history, for 10 years. How do you fake that?
Okay, we've got time for, I think, one more question from the audience. So we'll take the next question.
Here. Hi.
Hi.
You can take two then. That's okay.
Take two questions as long as they're the same.
My name is Edith, and my question, I want to touch back on the topic of the multiple services. So the scenario that I recently looked at was Nuance came up with a solution for specifically the automotive use case, where you have an AI agent in a car, it's a confined space, and one AI agent can manage the communication with the humans in it. And what their demo that I looked at was showing is that they handle a conversation with the humans, and the humans are asking for different types of information, so they will route as a cognitive arbitrator. They will route the request to Alexa or to Cortana or to whatever the provider would be for specific services. So I basically wanted to know if anybody's thinking about taking it a step further, which will end up being AI to AI. Let's say this AI agent wants to provide more information or end up with a dialogue with Alexa or whatever. Are we there yet, or is that just a little bit too much of science fiction?
No, I would say we're close to that.
Yeah.
Alexa and Cortana are working together. Amazon and Microsoft announced last year that we were integrating Cortana with Alexa, and it's definitely, as you say, there's, I think customers expect that they should be able to access multiple AIs. There will be AIs that have specialized data. You'll have AIs that you have a relationship with, Cortana in this case, robust in productivity. And so we're working on that now. We're hoping to release something when it's ready soon. It's hard.
Yeah,
you know, you got to really solve the customer experience issues. It's the first time we've done this.
So actually, agent-to-agent interaction has been going on for a long time. Bringing it to the surface in the way the customers like it, that's an interesting part.
You can build a relationship between Cortana and Alexa and get them to talk to each other.
Oh, that's very much what we're doing. The thing is, you have to make it feel natural to the user. You mentioned an automotive scenario. I mean, there's so many different places where there are multiple parties involved that have different specialization of different information, and the problem of consistency and to some extent actually more coherence of like, is Cortana here the same as Cortana there? I mean, we're all struggling with that in different ways. It's part of the excitement about being in such a fast-paced space. People are coming to us asking us to deliver capabilities that, and you know, it's the good news, I guess, is that we're getting a lot more input about what people really want, and we're modeling it after something every human does. So this is not as esoteric as I guess as it might otherwise seem.
Good, thank you. Yeah, the last question.
So I have a very simple question. I'm just a user of Alexa. My daughter got me this about a year and a half ago and said, "Mom, now you can ask Alexa anything you want and not me." So, well, because I would ask her questions like, "Can you check if this airline is having special or whatever?" And she's like, "Now you can ask Alexa." So my question to you is like, voice is not just one thing, right? Voice is sound, tone, pitch, emotion. So I would love to see something like when my relatives come from India, they don't speak English, and they talk to Alexa, and Alexa is intelligent enough to convert that from that language into English and answer them back or connect to me saying, okay, these are the needs. Or if they are in trouble, to how to call 911, they don't, you know, whatever simple cases are like. When can we expect some basic built-in features around tone and pitch and languages? That is, all of that is voice to me.
That's a robust roadmap.
Yes.
What you just asked for. I will say we're probably years out in emotion. Some early work being done. We're definitely wanting to do this. It's a natural progression. Language is very much something we're focused on. We've rolled out multiple languages so far. We went to India, it's English. We've not yet started going down the long list of languages in India, but it's very much part of our plans. Internationalization of our products is very important to us. Our global customers are important to us. You know, it's an interesting thought exercise for some of these. highly connected scenarios with you and your family, and would your family be happy with a very narrow set of use cases in order to just make those connections? You know, I think it's hard for customers maybe to understand, like it's just highly limited, but it could also open up some experiences, because we do the same thing. We have family overseas and we like to talk to them. You have language barriers. So.
And we've been very focused on the subject of translation in particular. You know, we had some major breakthroughs very recently on the performance of real-time translation. It's a space that we've been doing lots and lots of work for a good long time. So same thing, right? Like global audience, you want to help people be able to communicate better with each other, you know, get stuff done with each other around the world. It's sort of a price of entry in many ways for anybody who wants to do this at scale.
Great. Well, let me, I'll close with the wrap-up question. One final question for everyone, which is on the panel, not everyone, but on the panel. That would take too long. In terms of this evening, what's the one thing that you would like the audience to take away from this evening? I'll kick it off just while you think. I've got 1A and 1B. 1A is the Loch Ness Monster is not real.
Not real.
Not real.
Not real.
And then B, I think from my perspective, is the notion that trust will be earned over time, and there is a long path ahead of us as we build value into these services, many more wonderful things to come.
Well, I said a number of times that human conversation is a very difficult thing, and it's one of the most natural things we do. So I thought I would end with an example, and since we're at the Churchill Club, I thought of Winston Churchill. So Winston Churchill has a lot of famous interactions, but one is between Lady Astor and Winston Churchill. And she says, "If I were married to you, I would put poison in your tea." And he says, "Madam, if I were your husband, I would drink it." So it's pretty funny, and it's gone down in history as pretty funny, but what I want people to take away is just think about that interaction and how much goes into that interaction. So first of all, the speakers have to know something about tea as a beverage that you can drink. That was not said, right? That poison is something that you probably don't want to drink, so it's kind of funny if you say that you would. It's things about marriage, all that kind of thing. But what I really want you to take away is Lady Astor started with a conversational move. She said that she would put poison in his tea. That demands a response, right? So that's how conversations work. That's how subtle it is.
I think I would say, you know, we say this a lot, but it's very much day one. It's day one in this space. There's a lot of capabilities that we now have, taking advantage of the past couple of decades, but there's a lot of experimentation left to be done, incremental improvements, and I think that's something that it's a hard problem, and language is complex and understanding, and so I just, you know, I look for inventors and builders and thinkers to look at ways that they can simplify these experiences for customers.
I would add that the real goal is to make that leap from convenience to truly assistive capabilities, and that's going to take, you know, ingenuity from everyone, and that it's not a winner-take-all game. And that applies to not only the big companies that are represented up here, but also to startups and the ecosystems that all of you, I'm sure, are a part of. This is, like all good shifts in technology, you know, something that appears to us as an incredible opportunity and great, you know, inventions left to be made. But it's not possible, and it certainly, just practically speaking, will not play out this way if you think that it's just one company or two companies that are just going to barrel through this. It's not US based. It's not going to be all figured out here. It's going to have to account for a lot of things about the broader world that we share. And yeah, that all of you should aspire to, you know, take part in this and help us build a better product. Hold us to a high standard on trust, on functionality, on everything.
Yeah, as Tony said, this is hard, but we've seen a lot of progress in the last few years, especially with deep learning and AI. Elon Musk said, AI is dangerous. It could be dangerous, I don't know, 1,000 years, but before that, I think, I'm optimistic. Conversation between human beings can be understood. Eventually, I think, your whole life could be understood by AI as well. So, I think life will be better. Despite all the potential challenges and scary things that may happen.
Including those that live in lakes in Scotland, supposedly.
Right. Very good. Thank you. I think that's right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I want to thank you again for coming and spending the evening with us. We know you have plenty of choices on how to spend your time and for sharing your perspectives with us so freely. And Martin, for leading the conversation so well. We do have a small gift for you. It is a Churchill Club speaker t-shirt. There it is.
Thank you.
Thanks again. A couple of brief closing announcements. First of all, our April programs are April 9 and 17. The first one is New World of Work, the Unraveling of Scale on the 9th, and then we have a location program on, I believe, the 17th. Both programs are in San Francisco. Also wanted to mention, I don't know if you know, but we have a speaker coach in residence at the Churchill Club, and he is in the house tonight. His name is Dennis Sakamoto. Dennis, would you raise your hand for me, please, or stand? This is Dennis. Feel free to talk to him if you'd like to, since you take advantage of the fact that he's with us here tonight. You've been a wonderful audience. Thank you so much. Good night. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Tomorrow with feedback. We'll do